Good afternoon. I'd like to call the April 12, 2022 GMSD Board Budget and Regular Work Session to order. I want to thank everyone that is here today. I know that it's one of my favorite days of the year. A lot of hours and hours and hours have gone into preparing the budget documents and explanations and suggestions that we're about to go over and that are going to be presented. I'd also like to welcome and thank our guests that are here today and apologize for the little bit of delay in start time. So thank you for accommodating us as we all get prepared to delve into a very lengthy discussion, one that we all look forward to. So at this time, we are going to start with agenda item number 1, GMSD FY 22-23 General Purpose Fund Budget Highlights. Mr. Manuel, Mr. Jones.
Well, I'll start us off, and of course we will have cabinet members come up because they all assist in creating the individual budgets that come from each of their departments, and of course they work with the schools on their recommendations on how to accomplish our goals. But we'll walk through our budget highlights for the community and for the board. It's just dragging. Okay, first, I think it's important to note this budget that we have prepared and that we've really worked with stakeholders, community on, we're excited about. And I think this could be, and we've had this conversation, one of the best budgets that we've ever created. And so how do you define, well, what's a great budget? What's a best budget? I think you look at achievement of our strategic plan goals, but you also think about the stakeholders involved and what type of impact it's going to have on students. And so we have a tremendous amount to celebrate in Germantown schools, and we're going to continue to do that through this budget process. And so some of the things that you're going to see when we talk about recruiting, developing, and retaining exemplary staff, when we talk about how we're taking care of our staff, and as you all know, we're all facing huge inflation and we're seeing increases in cost, how we're providing for our staff to support their families and support them, this budget accomplishes that. And that's always been a struggle for us. How do we do that? When we look at serving individual students and how are we really supporting individual students getting down into the classroom, this budget does that. And so you'll hear about the 430 hours of individual sessions that students have received and supports that they've received. When we talk about investments in fine arts, and that's always something that that we aspire to do, but we haven't always been able to accomplish. Miss Abel and I and her team, we've had a series of meetings with band directors, with our fine arts sponsors, and all the people in our schools to talk about how can we really provide the most support for those programs. And we think it's going to be a success because it takes the burden, or some of the burden, not all, off the parent groups that have been subsidizing this. This budget accomplishes all of those things. So we're excited for the board to dig in, and as you know, we're always in the draft process, so if you have questions or there are things that you're concerned about or you think there's something that we missed, that's why we have this break in between this session and when you actually vote on it, we can make those adjustments or make changes. But we're excited, and hopefully you'll see today as the cabinet members come up and present their sections or talk about their individual parts, we think it's going to have a huge impact on students, on families in the schools. So with that, Mr. Jones is going to talk about revenue.
All right, first let's take a look at revenues and available funds. Available funds would be any reduction in expenditure line items. First, we are projecting a $1.3 million increase in sales tax revenue for a total of $9 million. We're actually trending around $9.5 million for this year. So a significant increase in sales tax revenue. The increase in the city's maintenance of effort, and this is from FY 22, finally recognizing that amount at $532,000. We've yet to receive our maintenance of effort amount for FY 23. So once we do, we will update the budget for that. Our estimated increase in BEP revenue is at $659,000. Estimated increase in mixed drink tax revenue, $72,000. Gold tuition, this is our first year for gold tuition, projecting approximately 30 students for out-of-county tuition at $146,000. A decrease in the sale of equipment or technology equipment of $375,000, and that's an actual decrease in the revenue amount. Positive news here, a significant reduction in our Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System contribution rate for certified employees.
And
That's
just to
dropping
give everyone
from
clarity on TCRS, so on every paycheck that we have for staff, all teachers in the state of Tennessee, and there are also different municipalities who also sign into the Tennessee State Retirement System. That's the Tennessee Consolidated Retirement System. And typically the individual, I think it's around 5%, that the individual teachers and staff members are paying into that plan, but the district also has to provide funding for that too. And so every year we get an email saying, here's the percentage that the district has to put in to pay for retirement of your staff. So they take that money and they invest that money, and my guess is that's where some of that reduction may be.
right. I think an increase in market value of their investments. So that saved us $486,000. A $100,000 reduction in our transportation contract with Durham. So that's reducing that expenditure line item.
And I'll explain that briefly. So the contract itself has not changed. Know that Mr. Cathy's done an analysis of what's actually spent, because as you know, there's a national shortage of bus drivers, so we're always struggling with, because when they miss, getting replacements is always a challenge too. So typically we have 5 combined bus routes, and so he's done analysis of what we're actually spending, and that's where he's come up with this budget amount that he's plugged into the document based on real expenditure. So this is conservative. I think he was assuming that we may have one combined route all next year when we've had 5 this year, so we could actually spend less next year.
And we've built significant reserves in the cafeteria fund, several $100,000. So we are eliminating the operating transfer to the cafeteria fund from our operating budget. And finally, the use of reserves. We're proposing using $2.7 million in our reserves. And this basically is tied to 3 things: to our budget for our OPEB contribution, for our one-to-one initiative for technology, and capital projects. So if we have changes and revenues going down the road, these 3 budgets would be affected, and we would not adjust any operating cost.
So just to give you an update on where we are with the budget, I think, or on the reserve, based on Mr. Jones's predictions, he was looking at what's sitting right now, and I think you were saying it's 30 million that we're looking at right now.
We have about 30 million in reserves at this time.
You can't get big eyes with the 30 million because, as you know, we don't receive funding every single month as we go through. So we do have a last month of funding that we have to fund completely from our reserves. So that's about a 3 million. So that drops you immediately to 27 million. And then also 6 million that's unspent right now that you're seeing included in those reserves. This board is already allocated towards the Houston Middle School project and also the softball field project. So what we will do with that money is we won't let it roll in unallocated again. We keep that money restricted for those projects. We roll it to the next fiscal year. So that drops you down to about 21 million that we have sitting, which is a strong reserve for us, which is why we have this recommendation. And so I think this takes us down to about 18 million in the reserve, which we feel is a really good place to be. Mr. Jones, I don't know if there's anything else you'd...
I know, that's it, that covers it. Any questions on revenues or available funds?
As it pertains to the comments just a moment ago regarding the reserves, so I got down 3 to 27, the 6 of the combined HMS project and the softball field project to 21. I know in the past, we've talked a lot about the reserves also having just basic operational, keep everything running, figures that we're kind of like, don't look at that and assume that that's not accountable because
Yes.
it is.
So we always say eight to
Eight,
nine,
so,
and that's
okay.
being very, very conservative. So that's why we feel good.
Looking at this and also not really knowing what TISA's going to do to us, are you at all nervous about any of it?
Not one bit.
Okay, so tell me why you're not, because I'm a little nervous.
We have seen TISA projections, and we're not sure, like we always talk about, the details aren't all known for TISA, but they are projecting increases for our district, and I've seen some from 4 to 5 million that they project we increase. Now, we know that they built in an increase in student enrollment that we don't project that we're going to see. We think they had us at 6139
6,100.
or some around 6,100. So we really think it's going to be around 6,000 students is our target number that we hit. But for us, the concern shouldn't be about whether I believe we're going to see an increase in funding under TISA. From everything I've heard from all the projections, the challenge is going to be is where does that come from? As a taxpayer in Germantown and in Shelby County, I think the concern needs to be, are they shifting the burden from the state to our local age? That's the real concern. But as far as our roles as board and district, I feel very confident that we're going to see yes.
Yes.
And we're going to see an increase, like we're seeing an increase this year in our BP because of that increase in TISA that they're projecting to. So we should be in a very good place.
Yeah, my conversations with the state going to indicate basically the Tennessee Department of Education's allocating $1 billion to the LEAs. Additional.
And I know there was some talk when we went up to Legislative Day on the Hill. I know one of the senators mentioned that there was some STEM money that was going to be allocated, I think 1.5 million. That's not included in
That
here,
is not included in here. That's something that we could use to develop new programs, CTE. That the goal is for it to be for CTE purposes. So we still see that included in the TISA bills and stuff that are still waiting to go through our legislature.
Yeah, sorry, I meant CTE on that. So, but when that passes, assuming it does, then we'll come back and then decide via budget amendment how we're going to handle it.
So typically what you see, we'll recognize it as a budget amendment. Depending on how they allocate it, we don't know whether it's going to be people or programs or capital. It may be, from what I heard, it could be a capital investment. And so then we would recognize it into our capital outlay accounts and then fit that
Similar
into
to how we handle our grants. Anything else?
And based on that particular CTE specific, again, understanding that we're not exactly sure how it would come or what it would come to, that's one time.
That's correct.
That's what-
So the goal is to develop your facilities to support new CTE programming that is coming.
I know that's a big push for the governor, and I know when we met with the Senate Education Committee Chair, that was a conversation that we had, again, when we were in Nashville, and that once we determine what we can do with it and how it's gonna come, that'll really help open that up. And obviously, that's a priority for us, but I wanna make sure that everyone in the community understands that investment as opportunity as well, because it is something that's new, that fits right in with what we're trying to accomplish.
Other questions on revenue?
With the revenue that we're receiving from Goal, is that, and the numbers of students who've enrolled, are we looking at a break-even point yet? Or are we getting close to a break-even, or?
We're close. We're probably sitting, I think, like 23 students. She's still enrolling students at this. Dr. Fisher's still enrolling students at this time. So yeah, we're pretty close to that
Getting
break-even
close.
number. But we still include it on the revenue and then on the expenditure
Right,
side
I was
also.
just wanting to, I knew that's not the goal, but the goal of goal, that
Yeah.
sounds kind of funny, but it's we do want it ultimately to be self-supporting in the
Right.
sense.
And I think that the challenge for us is how we're budgeting resident students versus non-resident students, because that's completely new income or revenue coming in when we look at those students. But it's going to be smaller numbers of students coming from outside the city of Germantown. Like I said, we're looking at 23 to 30 students. I think we're projecting like 80 to 90 students total in the whole program. So it's hard to say, and we've had this discussion, completely break even, because for all 80 plus of those students, we're receiving revenue that we're not then spending on a teacher or other staff members too. So is it self-sufficient completely with non-resident students, or is it self-sufficient with all the students that are included? So that's our.
And that's something that would be unique to this year with the expansion. So last year, those conversations were that it was basically taking care of itself after a certain amount of enrollment. This is new, as you pointed out, so that's what makes this particular budget for it different. I think there's been a couple, so in the points of the Durham and also the cafeteria fund, that's wonderful. Right, we're always happy to see that. Will we talk about it when we get to those points as far as like what we are able to use those funds for, or like kind of how they just going to go into the pot?
Yeah, well, we have it going into the pot, so
Got
that's
it.
why we
Okay,
see.
that's
So
all
we're
it's
seeing
on
the in for the pot right now, and you're about to see how all the stuff that we're about to list after this is the out.
That was my understanding, but okay, perfect. Thank you so much for the clarification.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. We're ready to move on to the next.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr.
you.
Jones.
Now we'll start seeing some of the expenditures.
Okay.
Good afternoon. So I'm excited to jump into our engaging, innovative, challenging academics part of our budget. So we're looking at highlights here. This is not our entire budget, of course. These are just some of the things that we're looking at increasing or changing. And so one of the feedback pieces that we get from teachers as well as principals on professional development and district learning day. We have 2 district learning days throughout the school year. And in the past, we've been having either administrators or teachers take on those sessions, which is fine in a sense because they get to showcase, what their expertise is, and other teachers grow from other teachers. But at the same time, sometimes they want somebody brought in to help them grow professionally and have an expert come in to deliver that, or an innovative speaker to come in and challenge and motivate. So we wanted to add that item to our budget to bring in the in-house training for our teachers. So the other item that you see here is to add 2 instructional technology coaches, and this slide that is up here now explains the rationale behind that. So the role of we call them the ITCs. They are instructional coaches in the sense of technology. So we know that teachers now have to teach with a lot more technology than they ever did, and to be able to implement that effectively, they need a coach to support them. So we want to move beyond just using a device as a substitute for an overhead projector, which our teachers have done an amazing job of doing. But we're also looking at how can we most effectively use that technology. And as you can see, their role has expanded, and they're trying to serve multiple schools. So it's hard to do that effectively when you have 70 plus software programs to support and all of your students using devices every day, 48 plus PLCs that they try to meet with weekly. So we really do want the ITCs to plug into the professional learning communities where teachers are meeting and planning or designing their assessments. So to do that even on a larger scale, we would love to have an ITC in every building. We also have 80 plus total teacher interactions, whether that be visiting the classrooms, the teacher stopping them in the hallway, hey, can you help me with this? So we want them to be able to fulfill their role to the best of their ability. And I could go on and on about the rationale for an ITC, but I will open it up to questions and see if you would like to know more.
So will they be providing IT support? I'm thinking kind of along the lines of Mr. Pierce's department, or are they dealing with software and programming itself?
Okay, so that's a great question because there is some confusion sometimes between the 2 roles of an STS, which is the Systems Technology Specialist support, and they handle more of the hardware and the behind the scenes kind of with the technology, and the ITC handles the educational component of using the device, using Schoology to post materials, using instructional tools such as CAMI or a formative assessment software where they can immediately poll their class and see who's doing, how they're doing, like a formative assessment piece to guide their instruction. So they do work well together. A lot of the students will stop by the office, hey, I can't log into my email today, I can't log into Schoology today, and whoever's available will help them. So they tag team quite a bit, but they do have different roles to fulfill.
But we have ITCs currently in our schools, but we have some that are sharing between schools. So the challenge with tech support is you can't put that on a timeline. When people need support, they need support, and a lot of times not having those individuals in the schools on a consistent basis poses problems.
So with this expansion, I will just say personally, I have heard from a host of teachers that have benefited dramatically from the existing ones, as we all know, like you said in the beginning, just the utilization of technology in the classroom has, my goodness, it is like tenfold comparatively to the past few years. And just that support, like you said, too, it's when you need it, you need it. And so while some people I've heard from families, too, this particular educator, fantastic, not so tight on the front end in the technology department. And then there's plenty of people that may be the other way. They're more, evened out in that way. But having this, like, immediate ability to, one, give them confidence. I think a lot of people have grown. I've heard from teachers who've been, teaching in some of our schools for 20 years, and they were like, I never thought that I'd be at this place, but look at me now, And again, that ability to, while the students are one-to-one, and now with all the platforms that are being utilized, I think that making sure that our staff feel supported with so much of the technology being part of the everyday and the every moment of classroom life now is really helpful. I've heard a lot of people, like I say, compliment the people that they rely on in that way, and to be able to offer that more on-site, I think is a tremendous investment that would be very well received.
You brought up two good points, because we do get feedback that teachers are looking for their ITC and they can't find them because they're in another building that day. There's always a need for technology support. And then the teachers who aren't implementing it yet quite as effectively need that coaching. And so they actually have a coaching cycle where they meet regularly with the teacher, give them some tips. They come and co-teach with them. So it's amazing to see the transformation with the ITC in the classroom with the teacher, helping them get that comfort level. It really improves upon that. And then we've also looked at the need for digital citizenship more so. So we all know that's a major concern and need for all students. And so the ITCs are ready to take that on. If they're in every building, they can be more of that digital curriculum implementation. We have the curriculum. We just need the staff to be able to fit that into the teacher's classroom. And the ITC could rotate in and implement that with the students.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because everybody at this table hears me bring that up a lot. And I hear it from students, I hear it from faculty, and I hear it from parents often. And that is not a situation that is going away. It is, while it may be evolving, it is where we live. It is the world we live in this moment, in this time with technology and students' access and even adults' access. And to know that is also in this sort of academic portion is nice, because I think a lot of times we think about that coming out of maybe school services or student services, more that counselor support. But this is way big, because when you're using a device all day, every day for school, and then you're also in your personal life using your things in the palm of your hand, access constantly, I think that reminding the greater community that is something that we need to focus on, not just on your personal devices, but also on your school devices, and how those kind of messages go hand in hand. So I'm glad to hear that connection as well.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Yes. So as you know, we talked about goal a few minutes ago. We do have 2 staff members, a principal and an administrative assistant, who were paid for out of last year's budget or the current budget that we're in with ESSER funds. So we would like to transition that to our general budget funds. And all of the salaries that you see here, you'll notice the note at the bottom that these include fringes and benefits.
So that's all in when you see those dollar amounts. So now I'll talk briefly about the assistant principal, but we can tag team too. This came from a school level request, and we've seen this at the high school level. When we think about the role that an assistant principal takes on, they've got a lot on their plates that I don't think people realize when they walk in the door, they're already behind. Because for all the students with 504s, they're regularly having meetings with them to talk about their accommodations. So that may be an hour out of their day where they're sitting in 504 meetings or 2 hours. You think about the number of certified staff. There's 115 staff at the high school that they have to split up the evaluations for. And each evaluation requires 3 touches. We talk about the pre-meeting that you have with them to go over that information on a lot of their announced visits. Then you have the actual time where you're going into the classroom to observe that whole time. Then you have the post-meeting for them. You have professionalism where they'll meet and talk through their professionalism rubric. It is a very time-consuming process. So if you think about over 1,200 meetings that are having to be covered, that's a lot of work. And then the night coverage for the high school is a lot. If you think about all the teams and groups, and they're required to have an administrator at those events and games, they're having to cover all of those. So they're spread pretty thin at the high school level. We also have students with IEPs, same as the 504s, that they're regularly meeting with them. And some of them, those meetings can take 3 or 4 hours for one meeting when we talk about some of the more involved meetings. So this is our request, and we included this in the budget to really help with a lot of those responsibilities they're having at the high school.
So is this to replace the open position, or would this be
This
incremental?
is an additional position that we're
So we'll be
additional.
added, so one to fill the open position,
Yes.
and then the additional.
And so we've really talked about what could that role of that be for it, because currently they have the 4 assistant principals that cover each grade level for that school. This position can be not a jack of all trades, but they can be more of a specialist for some of those things. So for those special education meetings, for example, they may have an expertise in that area where they could really assist for those longer meetings that get more involved, or maybe their specialty is 504. So when they're talking about modifications, accommodations, they can really help serve a lot of those meeting functions too at that school level. So they may not have a grade level discipline, but that's to be worked out on the backside of how they share their job responsibilities there. Questions on the assistant principal there? Okay.
I was just gonna say that when you first mentioned that that was gonna be a suggestion, and it's specific to having the opportunity to have some maybe specialized, special ed, emphasis as we continue to, want to be everything to everyone, and also have good time allocation with these people in this particular position. Those admin roles we've seen in the past couple of years, again, just the access to students to admin, teacher to admin, admin to admin, and what that commitment looks like time-wise. And when you were, like you said, looking at it from the inside the building time of day, also the outside of building, the evenings, afternoons, the weekends, and what that looks like. I think that reinforcing that level of admin is only going to be helpful at our high school. And I'm really excited because I think that it's the perfect timing as it pertains to a lot of, just changes and that we've seen and needs in our community. So I'm really excited that you all identified that and that the school likely talked about their wishes for that, to see just to be a better, net cast for our students and families, and to also support our staff.
Okay, next up with our academic budget, we need to increase our software allowance due to expanding Navigance down to the middle school level for our college and career assessments. Also for CAMI, which you may have heard of if you have a child in our district, which allows them to annotate. It's a very useful tool. Increase, of course, the more software is used, the more companies want to increase their prices. So we're asking for a $25,000 increase for those such increases. For assessments, this year we only did 2 case benchmark assessments, and it has not been enough data for our teachers, for our admin, for our district office staff. So we would like to go back from 2 to 3 benchmark assessments, which that increase is indicated there. And then as well, we finally have a big textbook adoption coming up next school year. We have not had one in the past few years due to COVID, so they pushed the cycles back, and next year is math. And we have not done that since our very first year as a new district. Some of y'all might remember that. And we pulled those numbers, and we need to increase the budget from what it is currently to add an additional $265,000 to fulfill the need for the textbook math adoption. So that will not occur every single year. It's just that math is a big one, English is a big one. So we're asking for that just for the upcoming budget. Additionally, for our one-to-one technology initiatives, if you remember last year, we transitioned that into ESSER 3, and we had said at the time, when we do this, we're going to need to bring it back to the general budget if we want to maintain our one-to-one initiative. So we're asking to bring that back into the general budget. Any questions on any of those items?
Thank you. Yeah, go ahead.
Because I didn't know if the next slide was you or not. So, sorry. So I know one thing we've talked about a lot is the reading literacy for really K through 3, but really in that K to 2. And I know as part of TISA, they've mentioned increasing funding, but that's still a ways out. Is there any value, which I think there is, I can't put a number on it, for this year for our budget to increasing some intervention for that K to 2 range in advance of what's coming for the state?
So to answer your question, yes, and I've already done it. So one of the things that we did when we looked and dealt with the pandemic, and we had a lot of our students that were virtual in that first year of the pandemic, was we increased our numbers of teachers at our K through 3 level. And so, we receive funding based on those ratios, the 1 to 20 ratio, the 1 to 25, the 1 to 30 ratios, depending on the grade bands. So for us, we kept that staffing the same for our K through 3 that we had this year. So when you look at the number of teachers to students at each of our elementary schools, we kept an additional K through 3 teacher there to deal with that focus. And so we think that's going to be a good value add for our schools.
And I would add that our instructional ELA coach, Gina Witzel, for K through 8, her specialty is reading intervention, early reading foundations. And so she's been more intentional with these K through 2 teachers on early literacy.
And so those positions, the interventionist positions, are still included in the ESSER 3 or the ESSER 2. They're ESSER 3. They're still included in those ESSER 3 budgets rolling over. One thing that we may consider as we transition away from the ESSER 3 funds as a board is continuing those positions, because I do think they've had a value add. They're impacting instruction and students, so that'll be something that we'll have to discuss next year during our budget cycles.
Anything else? All right. Thank you, Ms. Abel.
All right, time to talk ESE. So the first request is a speech therapist over at Forest Hill. So this year we have had a person that's done 2 days a week there to help out, that's leaving Farmington, and then also contracted 2 days a week. With the rise in numbers, our request, and actually some of the school admin as well, was to have their own. So this will put each elementary at having 2 speech therapists. And the way we look at numbers just in general, for any time I'm asking a position, we look at numbers. It's not just the number, it's the students, the amount of sessions. So my therapist actually pulled their sessions per week and did a comparison. So this is just due to a lot of growth in kids that have particular needs. The special ed teacher at Forest Hill, again, it's not a, hey, there's 20 kids here, we need another gen ed teacher. You have to look at programs in the same way as I do with the speech therapist. So at Forest Hill, one of their programs is projected to have over 13 students receiving services, and with 3 additional students getting partial. We try to keep that ratio at 7 to 8, so asking for another teacher is keeping them at the same ratio as the other schools, including the high school and those programs. Any questions about those two before I move to goal? Okay. So with the goal, interventionist, sped, and testing coordinator, it's like a jack of all trades. We have been contracting for this year, so we have to have someone for goal, just like any other school that's a sped case manager, gives services, progress monitors, holds IEP meetings, does consults. That's the special ed side of things. On the other end of that is the testing coordinator. So you're wondering, well, how did we do that this year with RTI or the testing side? Well, you're looking at them. District office really stepped up to help Dr. Fisher when it came time to doing benchmark for Ames Webs or progress monitoring or whatever the case may be. So this person would be taking on some of that so some of our staff can get back to their other duties around schools. And any other thing to add with that one, Miss Abel? No? Okay. All right, so I'm not going to speak to the 4 counselors. I'm going to let Mr. Bland do that. I am going to start with the 2 school psychologist and homebound teacher. So that is in particular a homebound teacher to serve students with disabilities. So with the rise medical concerns around COVID, this is still continues. We've really been able to get a lot of those kids back, but not everybody. And so for those families who do have concerns around medical needs or being fragile or receiving treatments at St. Jude or any of those things, it is an option for service that we have to have to provide to students that require that. And then our school psych. So these guys were under ESSER 3. We are asking to move them into the general fund budget. This is just a fun picture of them. They're a great group. You look at the ratios of school psych to students, and this is something to celebrate. And you're wondering, what's our return on investment? So the next slide is really exciting. Yes. So how has the role expanded for the school psych? And we kind of discussed this when we were looking at the ESSER budgets. But a school psych is not just someone that can test and evaluate, and that's really where we have been until this year. They are qualified to do so much more, and so we really tried to highlight the mental health and behavior interventions that they can provide, and that they are able to partner with the social workers and the school counselors to provide any need within the school system. Now, if you've ever met a school psych, they're extremely detailed, and I just met with one before this meeting, and he described himself as a little odd. But no, they are incredible. They are keeping analytics about which student they're seeing, for what purpose, is it direct or indirect service, and it's in real time. Like, it's pretty incredible to kind of watch. They went from providing 0 last year type of hours for students to over 430 hours in direct services, which I think this is a huge celebration. When you look at the individual therapy, the staff consults around kind of what we've seen and an uptick in the need for this service, this is huge. I don't know if you want to play the videos or if y'all want to watch those later, but this is some of our...
To help our friends in need. You can count on me like 1, 2, 3, I'll be there. And I know when I need it, I can.
So I have a school psych that's really good as my social media person, right? The TikTok and the Instagram. And so she's able to highlight a lot of what they're doing. But that first little activity was something they did for the teachers. We know that keeping the teachers' morale up is also going to keep our students' morale up. And they do kindness Wednesdays, I think it is. I'm not sure the day of the week, but it's something that they couple together. And the next one just talks about being better together. So how do the counselors and school psychs work together to ensure they're supporting students? So that's our school psych.
We are all better together because we each have our unique strengths and weaknesses, and I feel like every time we collaborate together, we come out with better ideas because we use those strengths to support each other.
So with that, questions around school psychs or homebound teachers?
So this is one of those huge successes and highlights that I think we want to celebrate for our students. If you've ever had a child who's struggled or known family members that struggle, you realize how important this is for families and how important it is. A child's not going to be able to access the regular curriculum until we meet all of their needs. And having those additional 430 hours, that's power. That's real impact on families. That's real impact on students. So that's one of our highlights.
I'm going to let Mr. Bland talk to counselors.
If I may, I think it's important to recognize as well, you hit on the expansion of need and the exacerbation of obvious factors that we've all experienced. But that also, this is something that's been identified prior to even. This is something that this board and the previous board, working with the district, had determined that it was a priority that we wanted to see invested in more to be able to provide further services for more people. And as we know, what you just highlighted, the need has grown, but that this is a lot of planning and prioritizing of this need for years and years. And so here we are. I do think it's a celebration from that standpoint, and that we have the budget to be able to accomplish this is a testament to everybody in this room, and the work that we do just for the funds themselves. But the work that's done from that department has benefited so many people in our community that I hear from, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody hears that, because that's not the stuff that we always talk about in public, if you will. And a lot of families have really, really benefited from the expansion and the further focus that our district has made to provide that. And I just want to thank everybody for that. Thank you, Ms. Huffman. Mr. Bland.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I will talk about the addition of the school counselors into the budget. Last year, or this school year, they were in ESSER, and we're requesting to put them into the general fund for school counselors. We had an AP meeting maybe 2 weeks ago, and they went on and on about how helpful the school counselors have been for them to not only be able to talk to kids, but to free up assistant principals, to free themselves up to do other things. So it's been a huge benefit for them. We also have some data to show you about the return on investment. But before we go there, ASCA, this is a ASCA student to counselor ratio. Right now, you can see where we are at each of our schools. The Tennessee average is 1 to 301, so we're pretty close in every school, and that's with the addition of these counselors. If we remove those 4 counselors, our numbers go up, and we're a little bit more out of alignment with ASCA. So this is one reason that we're requesting to move them into the general budget. And on the next slide, you'll see some numbers. The guidance lessons, the classroom lessons have gone up, but more importantly, the one-to-one interactions and one-to-one hours with students have more than doubled. So that's a tremendous amount of hours compared to where we were on last year. So The counselors, along with the school psychs, we've been able to provide a lot of one-to-one interaction with students. Also, aside from the one-to-one, we're at about 586 group hours. And in those groups, they tackle things such as anger management, anxieties, self-confidence, conflict resolution. So they're touching kids daily in a variety of ways. So that's good. And then I think the last thing is the request. Many of the principals have requested a 504 clerical to assist with entering students into Skyward, putting that 504 designation on there, completing the paperwork in DocuSign. It takes, there are many steps involved once students have the initial meeting and the annual reviews. So they have the initial meeting. The 504 is good for 3 years. You have to reevaluate after 3 years. But best practice is to have annual reviews, and we do that. So not only do they the first year, but every year afterward, they have to coordinate with parents, schedule meetings, attend the meetings, enter the information into Skyward and DocuSign. This is a centralized person that will take care of all schools, which will free up, again, some of the duties that the APs have to do at each school. Any questions?
I've got a question about the high school, and I'm just asking because I'm not sure. For college and career counseling, obviously, we just have one that deals, are we overutilized there, or is there an opportunity to improve the workload and maybe provide better services or opportunities for the students? If that's an opportunity at the high school, I'd like to at least look at it.
I think a lot of the positions that we've added will help with that. Anything that we do to change those counselor to student ratios means that they've got more time to be dealing with long-term planning for students and working with individual students. So keeping those numbers, those counselor numbers high is one. This 504 clerical will assist the administrators and the counselors in working with students, because those are the people right now who are having to call and schedule these meetings, along with the special education clerical. So if you're aware, you know we have a special education clerical at every single school because they spend so much time doing these. We don't have the same numbers of 504s, but hopefully you could see in that other chart how they've increased the number of students who have 504s in the district over the past couple of years. It's increasing, so we need someone to manage that centrally.
Okay, so then for clarification, to make sure I understand, so this is someone for everyone as opposed to the sped clerical that are already on site?
Right, and that's due to the numbers. If there were enough at every school, where you would have one every school, but we think we're dipping our toe in the water to say, okay, to manage all of these, one person to start who's going to work for all the schools, scheduling those meetings and controlling the data. This first step.
Parents like me would actually reply back to those people in a timely fashion. Maybe they wouldn't have to tell me so many times, I'm sorry, Ms. Roberts. To Mr. Curry's point just a moment ago, I know that we've publicly talked about this in the past, and he kind of hit on it, and that's something that parents a lot of times, and I think some people within the high school community, staff-wise, we've talked about just how that counselor specific, not the grade level counselors, but that counselor specific to, that career college path director-ish, if you will, what the expansion potential is. I mean, that's a lot of kids, and that's a big job. And especially in our community, it's something that if some of these actions, like you say, are going to free up some of those other hours in the week or the day to help some of that focus, or maybe rally a little bit more of that concentration within that department at the high school level specifically, I think that's good to note, because that is something we get asked about a lot. Let's say however many seniors or juniors coming up, or even the plan from those that are just getting to the school, as freshmen, and what that looks like. And that single person in that role has a big, a very big function, a lot on their plate. So, bless you. I think that that's something that we do get asked about. I'd get asked that question a lot, like, hey, is this something that more people could be providing that service and I don't know, again, I'm not trying to get down in the weeds of how that is, but I think it, since he mentioned it and we're talking about those type of roles, I think that that's something that is worth mentioning, you know, in this conversation, because, again, that's a big undertaking and a lot on that particular position's plate.
And that's something that we can have Mr. Bland and Ms. Law look into to see what would her support look like, or are we getting the most for students? Are we able to serve them with our current staffing? I'll have them look into what that looks like.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, you don't see me up here too often talking about performing arts. This is a co-curricular part of our academics. So since our students take courses such as theater, choir, band during the school day, the support for those classes we have already provided. As you can see here, it says in our high school and middle school co-curricular programs, we're looking to provide additional compensation. We have already, as a district, when you combine our general budgets and our title budget supporting the schools with $185,000 in fine arts across the board, across all schools, and that's for instruments, it's for professional development, it's for repairs to instruments, sheet music, instructional supplies and materials. So all of that has gone to contribute toward the fine arts already. But when we looked across the board and did needs assessments, I personally talked to every performing arts director to get their input, and they shared the things that their boosters have had to support through their co-curriculars, such things as the plays, when Miss Christie needs to bring in a scenic designer, a costume designer, choreographer, for the choir performances when they have the choreography that goes along with it they just did in Arkansas last week. For our band, they have to bring an on-campus instructor who's there every day for color guard, for percussion. Also, in our middle schools, they have to bring in off-campus instructors, as well as our choral programs bringing in vocal specialists. So there are many people we bring in, off-campus instructors during the school day that the boosters have been providing stipends for. And so when we did a needs assessment and we looked at what could we do as a district to support that, we would like to lift some of that load from our booster organizations and take that on, as well as being able to provide for a bus for each organization to attend one local competition, such as concert festival, also All West. So we have set aside what it would take for that, and then also additional money for equipment. So if the band has to replace 3 sousaphones and it's $18,000, the money we currently provide would not allow for that. So if we add this additional money, we would be able to replace, with a long-term plan, instruments that need to be replaced or repaired. So along those lines, when we added all that up together, you'll see on the next slide that it was $90,000. So we're asking to add that to the general budget to support the performing arts. Do you have any questions about that item?
Can I leave a chair? That's been a target for several of us for several years. And parents who've advocated, there have been active parents who've advocated for more support for performing arts, because we have exceptional performing arts. We really do. And a lot of that falls on the shoulders of our parents to provide the support needed to have that. And we have outstanding instructors who provide that as well. So I'm thankful we are in a position where we can relieve a little bit off that burden off parents and boosters, and also provide what's needed. I mean, when we look at co-curricular in particular, it's always a conversation. What is necessary to provide for the curriculum, to provide for the class that we're teaching? Because if it were a science lab, you provide the supplies for the science lab. You don't have a booster group providing the supplies for the science lab. But but some of these things had kind of fallen through the cracks. So I'm thankful that we've done a needs assessment. I'm thankful we're looking at it, and And I'm especially thankful we're in a position where we can do something about it, where we haven't necessarily been in the past few years. So this is definitely a positive move forward, and I think you're going to have some pretty happy fine arts teachers if this budget is approved as it is.
And I think boosters also, because
And I
it takes the burden off of some of those increases.
Because a big shout out to our boosters. We have incredible boosters across the board, and we could not provide all the little niceties and extras that we do as a district without our parents. So a shout out to them, and yes, this should make everyone smile today.
All right, thank you.
I just want to reiterate what's already been mentioned. I'm glad that we are in a position for these funds to be allocated in that way. I'm glad to know the needs assessments. That's something that when I meet with Booster Club representatives specific to the fine arts, that's usually my first question. Well, all right, so as a parent, this is what you see versus an instructor. What do they see, and how does that get prioritized and communicated at the school level versus when it gets to us here, and kind of working through that. And that's been something even in the past, I'd say 9 to 12 months that I've had that conversation with a lot of groups and encourage a lot of people, to express these needs. And so I'm really glad that people are getting input from their stakeholders to pass it along to get to the place where we are now, because I think that identifying that is the first step, knowing that our district and board have a want to support, but also knowing what the wants and needs are, I think is just an increase in communication, I feel like, and the ability financially to pull it off. When that all comes together, this is beautiful. I mean, y'all saw me here. I was just smiling. I was like, yeah, this is happening, y'all. Because, again, I'm going to keep saying that probably a lot throughout this presentation, but this is something that we've talked about for a very long time. And I'm just so glad that the ability is there, and I look forward to being able to support these groups and take some of the pressure off of the parents who support their students every day in these programs. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
All right, thank you.
And then Mr. Cathy's coming up because he can speak from personal experience. I'm sure you could do the same, Mr. Curry. We've seen a huge increase in our students participating in our elementary running and cross country. And with that, I'll hand over to you, Mr. Cathy.
Yeah, that's the gist of it. We now have thriving programs for cross country and track at every one of our elementary schools. And usually it's community members, parents usually that coach those teams or take on the burden. This was actually principal requested as part of the, I believe in your district update last time, you got an update kind of on the compensation committee and some of the work that was being done there. And this was actually a principal request. Principals, cabinet members were able to submit requests for things of this nature. And this came through the principals saying, we love our programs. It's a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of energy. We'd love to be able to offer a stipend to our cross country and track elementary school coaches.
And I can speak from personal experience on this one. We have hundreds of kids from our GMSD schools that are out there running right now on Sundays at the track meets, and then also during cross country as well. So I think it's a fantastic thing for our district that we have so many active kids, and it's a very low cost of entry. Just need some good shoes and you're good. But it's an activity that, all skill levels, you don't have to be, you can run a 6-minute mile or you can run a 14-minute mile. Everyone's welcomed and encouraged. And I think it's good. And again, personally seeing, mine have been involved for years and years with the running. And I think this is well-deserved, and I'm glad to support it.
Welcome. The turning chairs. I do want to take a moment having specific to the stipends, and again, that goes back to the process of identifying the need and prioritizing the funds at the school level. So to hear that these, as we know about, but for the community, that these were principal requested funds to be spent in this way. Y'all have heard me talk a little bit about when we've talked about the bike program. What we found in the past 2 years is that a lot of people we couldn't do certain things, but we could do a whole lot more outside. And I think one of the biggest benefits, especially to our younger students, is that we've seen the increase in cycling and bicycling, and the track programs have exploded for a host of reasons. And I think that just the ability to be able to do something and also do it on behalf of your school, and we've expounded that ability, so that school pride, that connection we talk about all the time, this explosion of also the cross country, I would say, in the fall, but the expansion of the lower level track programs. I have met recently with our middle school track folks and a couple of our elementary track coaches, family members, parents. Again, to that point, the volunteerism that goes into that, the amount of time that goes into that is remarkable. And I think that this is just another example of how community support and also bringing an opportunity for our students to get together and again, but feel like they have a place and feel like that they're part of a team that represents their school and go out there and, by the way, be very successful, because I will say our runners seem to be doing very well based on the statistics and competitions I've seen in our community compared to some of our surrounding friends. So I really appreciate that. And as far as this goes for this is a question I was going to ask. So specific, I know this one was specifically requested, but as we go through the next few days, I'm curious, are there other stipends for other athletic groups that we have that have been identified as additional, as things have grown or as things maybe have leveled out? And then they've had to bring in other people, whether it be, strength coaches or outside people for any of our sports, even up to the high school level. I thought this was a good opportunity to ask about that since we're talking about stipends for athletics specifically.
We haven't at the elementary school level, because really the track and cross country are the ones that are consuming, and a lot of those are doing other community sports. But we have expanded our middle school offerings, if you've noticed, and we have our schools that have been joining the TMSAA, which historically was not the case for middle school sports. So you've seen it added with the soccer. So I think we've added those stipends. Last year we added a bunch of middle school. So this just is the next step down the line.
Thank you for pointing that out. That's kind of where I was going as far as what we have done and maybe what the needs are moving forward, that these are things that we're recognizing and, certainly getting with. So thank you.
So I probably should have just stayed up here earlier and switched my position on the slide, but you'll see on the next one a social emotional learning teacher. And just wanted to give a little explanation around this. This is something that was approved in the budget a couple years back, maybe two. My years are running together, right? That this past year we did have to move this person who was pushing into classrooms to provide that support to make a classroom. So our students' needs have shown that they needed a more restrictive setting. And so when that person was moved into a classroom to provide that support, we had to move to contract services. So this year we contracted with Catapult Learning and Mid-South Behavior Solutions to provide that push and support that is so needed, because obviously outside of that classroom, there were still plenty of behavioral and social emotional needs in the district. So the plan for next year is to continue to have that support, the most restrictive for students that do need that, but still provide that ability to push in and not contract those services, so bringing them in-house. Any questions?
I'll just give a follow-up. So we've talked about this before with acronyms. Usually we're talking about a STEP program, or we're talking about a program. As you know, we have to provide a continuum of services for students, whether it's in special education or dealing with students that have emotional disturbances or needs. And there are times when their needs require, like you said, a more restrictive setting. This is another thing when we talk about what counselors are doing, what psychologists are doing, what assistant principals are doing. As you know, there are times where we have students that have more severe needs, and sometimes they have to move a whole class away when a student's is in crisis or having an issue. Sometimes that becomes so frequent that we can't meet their needs in that regular classroom setting, and that's what this teacher would be doing.
pardon me for, thank you, Ms. Huffman. Welcome, Ms. Stratton. Before we proceed, I want to make sure that I'm following along where we are up here versus where we are here. And, or are we just kind of, if I make notes, I like to make sure I'm making them in the right spot.
So these are the highlights of the big changes, yeah.
Okay.
So you're doing good. Hang in there.
I'm still whole child highlights. Here we go. Just making sure as I'm,
Well, now
Thank
we're gonna
you.
be on staff recruitment.
Got it. All right. So, in thinking about strategically recruiting and retaining an exemplary staff, pay is always an important compensation factor for applicants as well as our current employees. And the bold budgetary recommendations we are bringing to you to help honor the professional efforts of our employees as well as to help attract top talent to educate and guide our students. First, we're recommending a 2% cost of living increase and salary step increase for all staff, which has a budgetary impact cost of $1,471,000, and it positively impacts all 687 GMSD employees.
And so hold there. So what you'll see when you look at the budget documents, if you're going line by line, when you're comparing one year to the other, for all positions, this has already been put into every single line item, which takes Mr. Jones and our Human Resources Department, both finance and Human Resources, spend a lot of time calculating those and figuring out those percentages. But that's where you see that. It's not like it's its own line item that you'll see that. It's throughout every single staff position that you see this included.
So in just talking some more about this 2% cost of living increase, it's not only going to benefit recruiting and retaining our educators, but all of our staff. And when we think about all of the employees that GMSD hires, we hire speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists and physical therapists, school technology support personnel, plant managers, psychologists, nurses. It's important for us to be competitive pay-wise with all of our job positions due to the increased demands in open positions, not only from surrounding school districts, but from the private sector as well.
So I know the state has been talking about, as part of their budget, teacher pay increases, and obviously that's funded, I guess if it's the old BEP, you get money for 400, but you have to spread out, amongst 500 or whatever. Would that, because I know sometimes with the state, you get the recurring versus non-recurring and all that. So I don't know all the I've heard it mentioned in legislative hearings. Would anything from the state be on top of that, or would we use the state funds, if there were any funds, to kind of help offset that?
So it's on top of it, and like you said, a lot of times when we have those increases that we've made with the cost of living, there's a threshold that you have to hit. Because as you know, we have funding formulas, but if we're already at this level, they move the bottom salary up each time they make one of those investments. So if the starting teacher salary, it's statewide, and I don't know it, I'm assuming it's like $44,000. If it's $44,000 a year, what they'll do is they say they're increasing that base pay by X amount. If we're already above that for our starting teacher salaries, we don't have to put that money into it. We could reallocate it elsewhere.
In regards to the holiday bonuses, we are recommending the continuation of a one-time employment bonus of $1,000 for full-time staff and $500 for part-time staff. This bonus is similar to our previous year's COVID bonuses, which has been warranted due to the extra implementation of protocols as well as student supports. This bonus request does have a budgetary cost of $771,000, and it positively impacts all 687 GMSD employees. Okay. And so just to give maybe the folks who are watching some background information on payroll in GMSD when we talk about the 2021 school year frozen steps, all employees are placed on individual salary schedules based on their job position, and each salary schedule consists of a set of steps that determine their yearly earnings. So for educators, salary steps correspond to their experience level.
For example, a teacher with 5 years of teaching experience is placed on step 4 of the GMSD teacher salary schedule, since our salary step begins with a step 0. It's kind of a little confusing. But once an employee reaches his or her highest salary step, then that employee is maxed out and will continue to earn the same salary amount on that step year after year, unless the school board approves a percentage increase. So each year, recommendations are brought to you all to determine whether or not our employees receive a step increase. For the 2021 school year, the GMSD School Board did not recommend a salary step increase for educators due to the economic uncertainty of the COVID pandemic. So all educators' steps were frozen for that year.
And I will give the caveat that at the same time that we were freezing that step, we were giving a cost of living across the board for everyone. So everyone was moving a 2%, but some people in some years will see a 3 or 4% if they get the cost of living and they're getting a step. But that year, in order to make the budget balance, that's why we froze that step.
So now that we do have some clarity on those financial implications of COVID in our community, and as a way to continue to retain our educators, we are recommending to give back the step increase that was frozen for those educators who were employed in the district during the 2021 school year. This additional step increase just for our GMSD teachers has a budgetary cost of $550,000, and it positively impacts 266 GMSD educators.
So this is teachers only who were employed with us from 2020, 2021, and are still currently employed with, I mean, like it's
That's
not-
correct. So an example would be they may have been at a step 3 in 2021, and then this year they moved to the step 4, or they would have gone up to a 4, but we held them that year, and so instead of being at step 5 now, they're going to be on step 6. So it just moves them where they would have been if we had kept on stepping them through their progression. But like you said, only for those people who were employed. Everybody else is coming in at the steps
And it is
where
what
they
it
are,
is.
and it is what it is.
Okay, and it's only the teachers.
That's
It's only the teachers.
Not- Okay.
Okay. And then our final educator payroll compensation budget request is directly targeted at strengthening our educator compensation package, allowing GMSD to attract and retain our most qualified and experienced educators, as well as for us to jump back on that list of top school districts for staff compensation in Tennessee. And again, just a little bit of history. When GMSD was formed, the school board requested and approved a different educator salary schedule from the salary schedule Shelby County Schools used for their educators as a way to be fiscally conservative. The differentiated teacher salary schedule, which was the name of the GMSD salary schedule, was used for any new educator hired by GMSD beginning with the 2014-15 school year. Only GMSD educators who worked for Shelby County Schools during the demerger and were employed with GMSD during the 2014-15 school year were grandfathered onto what's called the legacy teacher salary schedule. And we do have both of those salary schedules on the overhead for you to look at. So the key differences between the two salary schedules include the compensation amounts for advanced degrees. The differentiated salary schedule has 3 salary lanes: bachelor's, master's, and beyond master's, which means that educators who have their master's plus 30, their education specialist, or their education doctorate degree are all on the same salary lane. The legacy teacher salary schedule devotes a separate salary lane for each advanced degree distinction, with increased compensation for the most advanced degrees. GMSD is proposing moving the current 217 educators on the differentiated salary schedule over to the legacy salary schedule, and then placing the 153 employees who have advanced degrees on their respective advanced degree salary lane. In addition, we would like to officially retire the differentiated salary schedule and place all new hires on the legacy salary schedule. By moving to the legacy salary schedule, GMSD will be in alignment with our fellow municipalities, as those districts have always used the legacy salary schedule lanes to compensate for advanced degrees. And this recruitment and retainment strategy has a budgetary cost of $350,000.
I just want to say, on behalf of the teachers that we currently have, that this will benefit, thank you. And how exciting this is. If this, well, I should say this about every single thing on the highlight. I feel like this is the best money we're spending. Yeah. This is the best money we're spending. No this, no this. The good news is there's so much of that to say. And I appreciate the history lesson because I've heard little bits and pieces along the way in my experience up here. But talking to some of our staff and also talking to staff members of districts that surround us over the past few years, I have better tried to understand. I would love a copy of those two schedules side by side because that really does help me visually. And if, as we continue to invest in our existing employees, also, though, as we like to recruit the top of the top, and the last thing we want to do is have to explain to somebody why, hey, this is the best place to work, but, yeah, I know you can go next door and do this or that if you're making a change, especially with people within just Shelby County, from Legacy, SCS, or other municipal districts that are looking to make changes because opportunities present themselves with open positions. We want to be level playing field, and then I think the rest will take care of itself because we are that place, the destination. And again, that's where I hear from people that work in other districts, and we talk a little bit about those things. And so in order to be able to accommodate and allow for this, you just said retire the legacy schedule. I was like, what?
Retire the differentiated salary schedule.
No, we're going to, I'm sorry, the differentiated, yes. Differentiated, not legacy. That's big. That's big for our district now, but it's huge for our district in the future.
Yes.
And I'm really excited about that.
I'm excited. I think this is long overdue, and we've talked about it before. I'm excited to be able to compensate our employees that have advanced degrees, but this really serves also to encourage our current employees to seek higher degrees.
Yes.
And I think that's always invaluable to the district, so thank you for this.
All right. Let's see. Okay, so then the next one. Okay, so the HR specialist 120-day contract. This is a department request from HR. We will be experiencing some pretty significant staffing changes with the out-of-state move of our benefits specialists and the upcoming retirement of our HR specialists during the 2022-23 school year. So we do want to make sure there is as little disruption as possible to our employees when our HR department is training our new staff. So as part of our succession plan, we are requesting a 120-day contract for our current HR specialist. This does have a budgetary impact of $39,000. But this 120-day contract will allow our current HR specialist to train the new HR specialists on some of our Skyward employee management system, our onboarding procedures, and just daily HR tasks.
And this is bittersweet. We're losing two incredible employees out of a four-man human resources department. You're losing two, and they're going, for work, spouse work. They're not leaving because of our district. They're very happy where they are. But the goal here is transition planning, making sure that they can be alongside with their replacements, training them up during their time, especially when we're talking about the specialist position that's dealing with insurance. When you think about the fact that we're getting ready to start our enrollment period and how are you dealing with claims, that's going to be something very beneficial to have them help the next person who's taking their position.
Well, and usually you don't get the benefit of a transition period like that, so I'm glad that we're able to take advantage. And yeah, while it's bittersweet, I feel like that's a good investment. HR is, it's probably one of the most important things we have. So, yeah, I think that's good planning, and it's just good that it worked out that way.
All right, the analyst to specialist upgrades. This is a request from our exceptional student education, our student services, our operations, and our teaching, learning, and assessment departments to transition the department analysts to department specialists. Over the years, the duties of our current analysts have evolved to closely mirror the scope of work of our specialists, and there's really hardly any distinction between what analysts do and what specialists do. So as a way to more accurately depict the essential functions of these individuals, we are recommending the salary and title upgrades to specialists. It has a budgetary impact of about $43,000.
How many people does this impact?
Yes.
So that's been one of our challenges it's good being a small district, but you have people who aren't strictly in clerical positions anymore. They're doing a whole lot more than clerical. They're having to make autonomous decision-making, and so that's why when we were looking at these two different roles, it's hard to tell, why is this person an analyst versus this person a specialist. And so we are actually going to sunset the same way as we're making the differentiated pay go away as we clean up our structure here. We're streamlining central office, getting rid of the analysts.
Okay, so we're going to turn our attention to substitutes. Through our conversations with our current board members and some of our employees, one way to invest in our staff is by giving them time to focus on their mental health or responsibilities outside of school. So as part of our employees' enhanced overall compensation package, GMSD is proposing adding one extra personal day for all GMSD staff. Currently, GMSD has 402 classroom teachers and 55 special education paraprofessionals who will need sub-coverage for the extra personal day. So this recruitment and retention strategy does have a budgetary impact in the amount of $59,000 for substitute costs.
I just want to thank Mr. Manuel for indulging me on that request. So this, for my fellow board members, this is the first time you've heard about this, obviously. So in a conversation with Mr. Manuel, I was looking for ways that we could differentiate ourselves from our surrounding districts. You know, if the pay is equal or pretty close to being equal, then you got to be attractive to prospective teachers, because if they're choosing between us, Carterville, Lakeland, you know, what can set us apart? And obviously, you know, if it's all pay, well, then, you know, you're looking for a good work environment. But, you know, hey, what about an extra personal day? And is that something that might get a teacher to choose us over another district? And right now, truthfully, it's an employee's market. I mean, they you know, it's just you know, education just like any other industry right now, and you know, it's a competition to hire the best and the brightest. And so it was one of kind of a thought that I had, and again shared it with Mr. Manuel, and I talked to you, Mr. Stratton, about it, and just to see, was that something that was even feasible? And I'm glad it is. And I guess there'll be some teachers, I think, just kind of for everyone's benefit, there will be some teachers that probably choose not to take it, and they'll just choose to bank that day.
Right.
There's teachers who don't take the days they have off now.
You got it.
But I do think that there will be teachers who will actually take that and use that, and I'm hopeful that the board will approve that as just another thing that sets us apart in the employment market.
Thank you, Board Member Curry. Well, I see that as certainly a wonderful recruitment tool, a differentiation. I also hear from current staff members that would be grateful for it for a host of reasons. And that gets me to a quick question. I just want to make sure I understand when we talk about teachers who are out of the classroom for a school-related event or activity, often there is a substitute cost that's associated with that absence.
That's correct.
Even though it is on behalf, they may be with other teachers, or they may be with 40 students, or, you know, what that looks like. And this actual thing got brought up to me by someone in our district recently, and it was specific to that scenario, like, hey, yeah, that would be helpful. So this one time a year would be very helpful to allow for that financial coverage of that sub that would be required if someone's off-site. But maybe that's where you were headed with that. I just want to
Yeah.
make sure I understand how
So
that
we
works.
have different types of absences that the teachers can put in for. So there are board-approved absences. So just so you know, there are some absences that we'll pay for out of the district fund. So for example, if a team is going to state, we would pay for that substitute because that's something that's an expectation of us. But that's not always the case if, for example, the soccer team decided that they were going to play games in Alabama. They're not required to go to Alabama. They want to go there to get a better, more rigorous competition for them. But that's something that sometimes the booster club would pay for the substitute for that cost. For the teacher, it still doesn't take their day because it's a board-approved absence, but that bill will be sent to that booster club because it's an additional day for them. So it shouldn't impact the teacher's bottom line as far as days. They shouldn't have to use these personal days for that function. These are above and beyond those duties, so they can get approved absences and get substitutes for those days that don't take off of their counts. So this is additional.
So to that point, if one of those events wasn't on that type of an absence, they could. This would help them offset that, and so they wouldn't incur that cost. Okay, perfect. Thank you for the explanation.
I do think it's worth mentioning to note that one of the main reasons why our GMSD schools were able to stay open throughout the height of this year's COVID pandemic was because of our substitutes. This year, our community stepped up and answered the call to volunteer their time to sub while our employees took needed time off to care for either themselves or a loved one who was sick. Our substitutes are truly an integral part of the GMSD work family, and it's been 8 years since we have invested in them. So therefore, GMSD HR and TLA are requesting about a $90,000 increase or maybe a 15% increase to the overall substitute budget for FY23, which allots for an increased daily rate of pay for general substitutes, interim teachers, and substitute SPED paraprofessionals. This increase will assist GMSD in staying competitive with other local school districts who have adjusted their substitute compensation, as well as to help GMSD recruit consistent and reliable substitutes to support our students and staff who need to take time off. So this slide that we have showing right now outlines the proposed increase in daily rates of pay for our substitutes. An additional adjustment that we are proposing is to pay our SPED paraprofessional substitutes the same flat daily rate of pay as our classroom substitutes instead of an hourly rate of pay. Our SPED assistant substitute vacancies have some of the highest percentages of unfilled jobs, and there really isn't much difference in the amount of work that these subs do as opposed to a classroom sub on a daily basis.
And if anything, it could actually be more taxing because you may have children where they have a high schooler that they may be changing diapers on. I mean, it may be a really involved job that day. So know that increase in pay may get more of those positions filled when those individuals are absent.
I think it's fantastic, and that's something that has gotten brought up to us. I echo Ms. Stratton. The amount of parents that we have serving as substitutes in our schools, not maybe even their own student schools, but across our district, is a testament to hearing the call and also filling the void and being able to participate in supporting the teachers that are needing to be away. And I commend everyone outside or inside of our community that have really helped us in that way and helped our schools in those ways. So the compensation piece for those folks specific to the paras has gotten brought up a lot, and I'm really glad that this is an opportunity to address and in my mind rectify that. I think that it's really important that in order to have, like you said, consistent but also suitable folks pick us that maybe would drive 15 minutes to one of our schools versus drive 45 minutes to another school that may be at a different rate. So I really appreciate this being something that is, we're able to do, but make us, again, the destination for folks that are willing to help us in these interim positions.
Okay. All right. And our final employee cohort budgetary recommendation focuses on upgrades to our school secretary pay scales. This recommendation is also aligned to our current strategic plan, focusing on recruiting and retaining an exemplary staff. Our proposal includes utilizing $64,000 in order to level up our current school secretary salary schedules. We have about 20 employees who fall into this cohort. There are financial secretaries, our special education clericals, and our attendance operators at the schools. These employees provide direct support to our school operations, and it has been about 8 years since the district has focused on this cohort of employee compensation. We did a review of the school secretary salary schedules from Collierville, Arlington, and Bartlett, and determined that these municipalities do have higher hourly rates of pay than our current GMSD salary schedule for school secretaries. And we're proposing to adjust the salary schedule to mirror Collierville's salary schedule for 3 reasons. Number one, the scope of work of this cohort of employees has shifted over the last 8 years. Number two, we have a need to recruit the highest caliber of professional employees to work in our school offices, as these employees work directly with school finances and they're responsible for federal and state compliance tasks that directly affect districts' funding. And then finally, this additional compensation will help us to address the turnover rates that GMSD is experiencing with some of our school secretaries. And so $64,000 is the budgetary impact, and we have our current salary schedule and then the proposed salary schedule listed on the slide above.
What kind of turnover are we anticipating for this coming year?
So we do have a retirement of one financial secretary right now, and we're currently trying to fill a sped clerical position at one of our elementary schools.
Just for clarification, if the proposed increase is approved, the steps, that part doesn't change.
Correct.
So wherever you are is where you are, and then that would be for
You got it.
incoming or existing.
It's just your hourly rate. For our current school secretaries, it's just their hourly rate of pay is going to
So
change.
then, and anybody else, it would come in at the new rate.
You got it.
Well, again, I think that to level up and be comparable is what we're seeing, a consistent theme throughout the recruitment and retention piece of this budget. And I'm excited that that's an opportunity that we're able to accomplish. And it's due. I mean, I think that it's certainly warranted and long time. It's something that we want to continue to invest in our people. And this is, getting up even, that's the first step. I think that, we're, that's big, but it's also makes me realize, when we do comps with other districts, it's like, hey, we want to be this top level employer, and you and your department and the district is doing everything we can to continue that pursuit. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
This slide has a bit of a hodgepodge in it, so I'm going to cover a few of the items. I think Mr. Jones has an item in here. Mr. Manuel has an item in here. The first item is Moving on our district org chart, plant supervisor, operations supervisor. This affects one individual. This individual's been with us since the district's inception and is currently, and scope of work has grown over the years, but currently and always has supervised our plant managers. Also, since our day porters have come on, supervises our day porters. That includes daily job responsibilities, evaluation assistance, conflict resolution, and anything and everything else that you can think of, and works hand in hand with our outsourced custodial providers. So this individual's had the title supervisor in his title since he's been with the district, but we've never leveled his pay up with our other supervisors in the district.
So this matches them to the other supervisors in the district.
The second item on here, if you've been to a gas pump recently, you've seen that diesel's going for about $5 a gallon right now, and that is how all of our buses are fueled. I can't predict what the market will look like in the next year, but I added some money to our diesel fuel budget to anticipate that it's going to cost more next year to fuel our buses than it did this year.
Is that enough?
Well, it may not be. I may be back to this board at some point next year if diesel heads towards $8 a gallon. This is a conservative approach to reflect current market conditions, and I'm keeping fingers crossed and hopeful that diesel will head the other direction in a positive way and that it will be enough. But if it's not, then this board will be who we will be back in front of to ask for additional funds for that budget. Other capital outlay, this is a modest increase to that budget based on projected expenditures for next year as well as current expenditures. And I always remind the board, and I'm sure when you go through budget worksheets, you'll see this, and when you look at the general fund capital budget, you've got to subtract roughly $400,000 out of it because we still owe $200,000 on the field house project, and we spend $180,000 each year on our modular lease payments. So those dollars are not available for expenditure, and then there's a separate line item that has $500 and roughly $28,000 in it that are our payments for our bonds for the Riverdale addition as well as this district office. So those funds are segregated out. They can't be used for any future projects. Legal fee increase, Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, so this is just based on real analysis of what we're spending on legal fees. You know, we pay hourly, so this amount covers what we've been averaging, so an increase in legal fees. The next is audit fee, or you got a question, Mr.
So is that district or?
It's B.O.E. It's in the same line item, but it's district that we're driving. So audit fees, this is just an increase in the fees that we have to pay for our required audits that we have $14,000 there. And then software increases. Mr. Cathy, do you have that one? Or?
Yeah, this is a pretty simple one. And I brought Mr. Pierce and Mr. Burnett along if you had any additional questions, but they have a good 50 softwares that they go and get, and I'm exaggerating, it's not 50, but it's a lot of softwares. It's several softwares that they have to go back to each vendor and get quotes on each year, and this year the big ticket items that went up were Microsoft Office and GoGuardian, so we're requesting those additional funds to keep those softwares alive.
So I'm going back to plant supervisor to operations supervisor because $31,000 is a huge jump in a salary for there not to be an increase of responsibility or a change in job.
Yeah, so
it's a huge jump.
correct. And my answer is because when we built this district with this individual, we paid a small stipend to get them to come over. And they were, so we have, I feel like we have not been paying the same as other supervisors. So this is paying people what they should be paid and comparable to the other supervisor positions. So it makes all people with same title supervisor. So I understand that's a big jump, but once again, that's with benefits too. But the difference is you've got to look at this individual's in charge of all the plant managers in the whole district and also the day porters too. They're also responsible for all the waxing and stripping. And so when we have the custodial companies come in and do all that, this individual is going to every single school and assisting with how it's done. I mean, I think that this individual actually leads clinics for our custodial company on how you correctly wax and strip floors. But yeah, I would say it's paying them what they should be paid, but I understand that's a big increase.
The other, you brought it up, so elephant in the room, the modulars. No, I know there is great love for the modulars on the school level. At some point, they've got to go away. When are we going to be at that point?
I think that's a discussion that we can have. We have it every year. Every year our principals beg us, please don't. And I do have a list I could bring to the next board meeting if the board would like to hear how specifically they're being used right now. They are being utilized for a variety of purposes, and I can bring you a by classroom list of what that looks like. For what it's worth, our principals are begging for them not to go away because, and the biggest challenge that was expressed specifically from Farmington, music has always been in a portable there, even when we had the old portables there, and they just can't figure out the space in the building that would not be disruptive to other classrooms because those classrooms make a lot of noise. We also have counselors in those modulars. Like I said, I'll bring a full, we have, they're being used for a variety of purposes, but it is a drain on our general fund every year to the tune of $180,000 that could go elsewhere if they were not there.
And that's something for us that'll kind of be outside of this budget process because either way it's six on one hand, half a dozen on the other, because if we choose to remove those modules, then we've got the cost of disconnecting the plumbing, the electrical. So, but that is a discussion that's separate from this budget process. This doesn't influence it. That when y'all feel like it's time and y'all are ready, that's something that we can do an analysis for you of where they could go and what they could do. So we're glad to, if you want to, in the next couple months, have that discussion. And
At least have some type of plan in place because we've had this year by year. Let's go at it year by year. And haven't made any forward motion toward getting rid of the modulars. And I do understand that they like having the space and that there are challenges to not having the space. But I also understand that we fit more kids in less space and did just fine before. We've done that. We've been able to use the space we've had effectively before without the modulars.
That's correct.
So, or if we need to look at how do we need to potentially build out in one or more buildings.
Or modify
classrooms. Those are options. So I do say that I agree with you. This is a separate discussion from the budget, but I do think that we need to put some type of, this is how this is going to go in place. So yes, over the next couple of months.
The time is ripe is what you're saying for this discussion.
Time is ripe to have these discussions and that we're not yanking them away right now, but let's move in that direction.
Let's make some progress. And I do think the list of how they're currently being utilized will be invaluable to us as we begin to make those decisions.
Yeah, the question I had was Dogwood specifically in their modulars because I know they had the most space freed up with Forest Hill opening. Right. I think Farmington was still pretty much status quo. I think Farmington was using them. They didn't really lose that many students, but Dogwood lost the most. And so I questioned Dogwood specifically just because of Forest Hill right here behind us.
We'll be glad to bring that information to you. I think they've grown into those spaces,
Yes,
not student-wise, but they've taken.
Storage, I grow
Right? That's like my attic. Exactly, and I think that's a great point. I'm glad, as it got mentioned, I was like, oh, are we going to talk about that now? Great. I'm glad that Vice Chair opened or walked through the door, and I would ask that we get a little more information as we plan, because we have continued to say that we will do that. And I want to make sure that we have all the information and working, alongside with the schools and their utilization of them currently and what that plan of potentially moving away from them might look like. But again, that's what's on us financially speaking, and making sure that everybody has the space they need to do what they need to do, but also from a financial implication, that's something that we need to continue to stay on top of. So I'd appreciate that information in the next couple of meetings. Thank you.
So the explanation on this one, this is not an addition to the budget. So our procedure is always to spend other funds before we spend our general fund on capital improvement projects because those funds have time limitations and very specific guidelines that we have to meet in order to be able to spend those funds on capital. So the funds that we've been spending on the Houston High softball field project and the Houston Middle School addition are a mix of ESSER 2, ESSER 3, City of Germantown, and Shelby County Commission funds. And before we touch a dollar of general fund that the board allocated, we spend those funds down first. Well, those projects are behind, and so in this fiscal year, we're not going to spend those funds that the board allocated to complete those projects. So this is rolling those dollars over that are in this fiscal year into next fiscal year, so that when we have completely expended funds from those other sources that I just mentioned, those funds will be there in the general fund to finish those projects out.
Dare I ask, are we behind because of weather?
We are behind for a number of reasons, and weather is one of them. We are behind because of material delays, labor market challenges, and I mean, if you talk to any general contractor, they'll tell you the same. As a matter of fact, I think Linkus is working with Carterville right now, and they said, look, it's a year lead time on some things right now. It's difficult to get materials. So in particular, Houston Middle roofing materials is eventually going to be a holdup for us. But weather has not done us any favors, and unsuitable soil in Germantown never does us any favors. But weather has been a delay. We've gotten more rain than normal, and it has slowed us down.
Is this the point where we would ask about additional items, or when would that be? I don't want to go out of order.
No, we're about to be there. But it depends. Is it operations?
No, it would be
additional?
capital outlay.
Yeah, capital. That's fine.
So I was looking, and I don't know, I've got the city CIP here. Let's see, hang on, I'm looking at schools. They, right now, it looks like FY '26 and FY '27. They've got funds allocated for the Dogwood and Farmington gym floor upgrades. I think that's a need that we have currently. For a couple of reasons. Mr. Cathy knows he's coached GBL. I've watched many GBL games at Farmington and Dogwood, and it's like, well, Farmington probably is worse, but it's like an ice skating rink. You can't call it travel there because kids just, they're sliding everywhere. Dogwood, the goals in there, and I'm not saying that we need to have the nice motorized, hydraulic goals, but at Dogwood, you can't raise or lower the goals. So for the little kids games, they have to go in there and put a backboard on top of the backboard, and it's a white, basically the white plastic playground backboard that they put on top of the goal. And essentially, you could probably throw the ball from half court and hit it, and the ball's going to drop straight down. It's just the nature of Dogwood there. So if it sounds like we've got some reserves at our disposal, I don't think, because we have hundreds of our students, and then you're looking at the PE benefits. I'd like for us, I was going to see if there was something we could do with OPEB and having a reduction to be able to fund these items. I'm mindful Carterville Elementary just opened up a brand new gym as well, and so I look at our neighbors and it's like, that'd be nice. But I think the time has come to have parity across our schools, because you have Riverdale and Forest Hill with both state-of-the-art gyms, and you have Dogwood and Farmington that aren't anywhere close to that. I think there's an opportunity, because the city had obviously looked at allocating some funds there. In order to move that forward, I wouldn't object to for us taking care of the floor. I think there's an opportunity there, and I don't know how we would go about broaching the subject, but I think there's an opportunity for the PTOs at Farmington and Dogwood to maybe see about, I don't know, maybe trying to come up with a matching funds opportunity with the city, with Parks and Rec, to take care of the bleachers, as the bleachers at both are in pretty terrible shape. And so, if there's a deal where, I'll just say Dogwood PTO and the city can come up with maybe, I don't know, let's throw out $20,000 each in matching funds, that we take care of the floors, and then we get the bleachers taken care of, and possibly at Dogwood the goals. Again, that's just a thought while we're talking about capital outlay. I'm sure there's many other items, but I know that's something we had on the list. But looking at the CIP, that's not going to get done before calendar year 2026, and I just don't think we can wait 4 more years to get that done.
And I'll get you for, and as we always talk about with the capital improvement plan, that's really a list based on, the Fleming comes in and looks at how quickly things are going to wear out in the next 5 to 10 years, and that's why they put those into those 3 categories. So as the board, y'all can always decide, just like we've done in the past. Restrooms was one of those that we heard from our community one time that they wanted those restroom upgrades, and like you said, the board said, we're going to allocate money for this. You can do that in one of 2 ways. You could just make us that request and say, hey, we'd like to see that project move to the front of the list in Mr. Cathy's list that we have of the master's facility. That's something that we can do within that budget. Or you can, once again, like you said, look at reserve and say, because we do have a strong reserve, and say, hey, let's go ahead as a board and we're going to allocate, and you can do it through a budget amendment, or you could do it through this process and say, we're going to put this amount of money for this project. Y'all have that ability.
No, thank you. We needed that. And so my question would be, how much are we looking at? If we were going to consider reserves, how much would it take to?
So in the plan, and I'm going off of memory, but I would say $150,000 per gym would take care of the floors, take care of new goals, and partially take care of new bleachers. And the time to put new bleachers in is if you're putting a new floor in. You get the old bleachers out, put the new floor down, put the new bleachers in. But those would be the main 3 elements you'd need to really spruce those gyms up. And just as a side note for information, I know the board got this in one of the district updates. That is one of the items that we've requested through the city for each year, because it's a, I don't want to say low-hanging fruit, but in the grand scheme of things, as much money as you spend on capital, it is, and it has a benefit to the city because all of their youth basketball leagues are played in our gyms, specifically the younger age groups at Dogwood and Farmington. So I would be open to, if this board is willing, to circle back to the city and say, hey, we'd really love to move this. We'd really love to move this up because it has such a benefit to our school district as well as the city of Germantown. Is there a way that we can partner on this and move it up in the process? Because it does have a huge benefit to the city. Without our gyms, the basketball league doesn't happen in Germantown.
Please.
Yeah, I think that's the right move, to circle back to the city initially and see what we can do with them. And I'm looking at I carry this with me now. The master facilities plan is with me all the time. And in the plan, it lists each upgrade as $150 apiece. So that's $300,000
And that covers.
estimate for, it says gym floor and gym upgrade.
But what about the bleachers?
It'll take care of part of the bleachers, and again, it's been a few years since we've replaced a gym floor. I'm sure wood is up right now like everything else, so we need to get a current quote. And we have a good local vendor that we work with here, Sports Floors, which is right here locally. They've put in every gym floor that we've ever had. They're on a purchasing co-op, good company to work with. So I could get updated quotes that would reflect current price of material.
Could we please get updated quotes for goals, floors, and for bleachers?
Yes, ma'am.
The whole 9 yards?
And I say, I'm going to operate under the worst-case scenario that the city just decides that for whatever reason they don't want to do it, which I can't imagine. But if that's the case, I still think it's the right thing to do for us. And like I said, maybe, again, we can meet in the middle on some things. But, I mean, even the basketball aside, I want to see all of our elementaries on equal footing. And this, even if obviously we'd want to try to do the bleachers, but the floors, I mean, there's no reason that Dogwood and Farmington shouldn't be equal to Forest Hill and Riverdale. And I think about the events that we have in the gyms. I think about at Dogwood, the Veterans Day program, and you've got people coming in to the gyms. And I think having good bleachers is imperative. And again, not even if the city decides that they don't want to do it, I still think it's the right thing to do for us. And I hope we would consider it.
I agree.
I think at this point, however my fellow board members want to proceed, I think at this point, this looks to me like a potential budget amendment and not something that we would need to do for this budget session. Once we have harder and firmer numbers and more understanding of what the city may do to partner with us on this. So if we could look at that as a future a budget amendment, that would.
I would agree, and I would, making the broad assumption that our reserve is going to shake out like we're looking at it shaking out, then I think, yes, it could be a budget amendment.
And just add that before we proceeded with either of those projects, it would have to come back before this board because it exceeds the purchasing limits. So it would still have to come back before this board, and also just on the timing of it, it's very unlikely that it would happen this summer due to lead time on materials. By the time we get new pricing, the time we got it back to the board, and the only time I would ever recommend doing a gym floor is during the summer when the students and staff are not in session. So it's mid-April right now. It's very unlikely it would be this summer that we could get it done that fast. But we could be definitely set up to do it the following summer.
Which is still sooner than. 6 years from now. Right. No time like now.
Okay. And we have one more slide, and then we'll take a break after that. This is small, and typically we wouldn't highlight this amount, but we think it's important to talk about. Kevin, go back one. He clicked too many times. This is a school request, so Ms. Carter.
Yeah, no, this is a school request, so we're particularly proud of that. This was born out of, we've had a new focus to all of the leadership team meetings, so the school principals actually, after we discussed goal number 5, requested a special collaboration lab where we sat together and formed school communications plans. And you may notice that some of them have joined social media, the administrators themselves. So we're seeing a really good shift in thought towards accomplishing many of the objectives and indicators of success in goal 5. One of their requests was to add this particular stipend at all schools. And I see great value in it. We're going to start it nice and small, make sure that we're developing a good set of expectations. It is comparable to the webmaster stipend, which one could argue that in 2022, it's a similar amount of work.
I think it's exciting, but I also want to say this only adds to what I consider a monumental shift for us in our communications during this year. The communications have far exceeded my expectations. They have been incredible. We are hearing such positive things in the community. So congratulations on the work that you and your team does, and I just think this adds positively to it, so I find it another exciting venture.
No, I want to see if there's any other needs from the communications department. I know in years past, when we've looked at the minimal budget, and I have expressed numerous times that I would like to see if there's an opportunity to expound upon our investment in it. And to Ms. Lander's point just now, while I felt that way before, I feel like the magic is happening in the ways that if there is a need that's identified and we are financially able, I find that that's a place where I would personally like to invest. And you may not be fully prepared to tell us what that is. And okay, well, I'm just asking because I've said this again and again, and I mean it. And now I think that the funds may be available. So I say no time like the present.
That is much appreciated. I'd like to work with the superintendent to further discuss that with y'all, if that's okay.
Or the compensation committee. So,
Absolutely.
That's what we push through our requests.
Well, and in a unique way because of the department, but also what that department does in the world. And just the cost of goods have increased, and the demand has increased. And so, but also the people, like what we're doing here with the stipends, that's investing in the people, but just the overall ability to increase just the general, I guess, budget for that department, I would like to definitely get feedback from that, and it's something that I would personally prioritize and like to learn more about, so thank you. Are there any further questions or discussions based on items brought up today and the budget highlights?
I will be contacting you each individually just to field your questions or concerns, as I know that y'all have got to dig into this document. And for all of your benefit, we'll present the questions and comments that y'all have had so that everybody can know what everybody was wanting to know about, and so we can give you specifics from each department. So be expecting those calls in the next week to go through this document.
I want to thank all the board members. Interaction and questions and even suggestions prior to today that I know have been brought forth. This is a big undertaking that we get to participate in each year, that we all take very seriously. And again, the district's time and thoughtful considerations and suggestions and referrals to us and Mr. Jones and his team for just the preparing of the financial piece itself. I am very thankful for. And I think that we are at a position, if everyone is agreeable, that we might have a little bit of a recess in between the budget work session and the regular work session that we have combined today. So would we like to say, it's 3:07 p.m., would we like to recess until 3:30? 4 o'clock, 3:30? I know Ms. Estes is here, so, okay, perfect. Let's say 3:30. So at this time, we will recess the budget work session and reconvene back at 3:30 p.m. for the regular work session. Thank you.